Hi, you're watching the African Nutrition Society podcast. At the pre-conference School Health and Nutrition workshop, we've been deliberating on practical approaches to improve school health and nutrition. And so we have high-profile nutrition experts flying all over the world to come and share some insights. With me today, I have Professor Barry Popkins. Professor Barry Popkin developed the concept of the nutrition transition and also that of the double burden of malnutrition. He's actively involved in work on the program and policy design and evaluation in an attempt to reduce demand for unhealthy food and increase that for healthy, minimally processed and real food. He has published over 660 refereed journal articles and plus rated him as one of the top cited scholars in the world among 7 million scholars in 2017. You're welcome, sir.
Hi, pleased to be here.
Happy to have you as well. Is this your first time in Ghana?
No.
Oh,
no.
wow.
Second time.
So how has Ghana treated you so far?
Very good. Very
really
lovely.
Good to have you. Really good to have you. There's been a lot of talk about the double disease burden. And for the sake of people who are not familiar, could you please tell us about the concept of the nutrition transition?
Well, the concept of nutrition transition speaks to the way it looks at the different stages of change over time in how we eat, drink, and move. It starts back at Paleolithic man, tens of thousands of years ago, when people were hunter-gatherers and didn't farm, didn't do any of the sedentary activities then. Everything was done catching food by hand, maybe creating some tools a little bit later to get fish or to get fruit or other things. But essentially, as we shifted over time and developed some technology and so forth, we discovered how to plant crops, and slowly society, we continued to drink water, and but we began to go from a very varied diet to one which was quite constrained by the crops they were growing. And so the complexity of the diet went way down, and as a process we got shorter. For example, in early times in India, and during the hunter-gatherer period, their skeletons show they were over 2 feet tall. Today, you won't find any Indians really over that height. And during that early period of farming and all of that, we moved to eat that much more carbohydrate-heavy, main crop-heavy diet. Over time, as technology moved up, we gained more skills. We moved more and more toward the famine period, where population density increased, and we got a lot more undernutrition and malnutrition, continued to be much shorter. And then over time, with modern technology, we began to industrialize. We created new technologies that we could mill our food, save a lot of time for women, and slowly learn the processing of basic grains. And subsequently, we moved into much more of an industrial diet, which continued till this date in much of the world, and increasingly became laden with more added sugar, sodium, saturated fat. Today, it's shifted away from that period. Famine has disappeared except for wars and certain periods. We, as a planet, have the food to feed everyone, maybe not so much during the period of major war in multiple regions in the world, some of which are the food baskets for much of the globe. So we're in a different period. But in this period that exists around most of the world today, increasingly, our modern food processing has led us to what we now call ultra-processed food, the food very high in added sugar, sodium, saturated fat, but also very high in additives, colors, flavors, many other things, because this new kind of food is remade. It's very different. It's gone industrially almost down to the cellular level and recomposed, going from a grain and other things that we think of to almost looking like sawdust and then being reconstituted as a food with all these additives. That creates today the major increases going on across the globe in non-communicable diseases. And what we need, and increasingly sugary beverages and other beverages full of sugar, increasingly we need to move to a diet which goes back to having food, goes back to much mixed, healthier diet with a lot more real food in it, and in addition, find way to manufacture movement, because we become, with all this industrialization, cars, everything else, cell phones, very sedentary. The planet as a whole has gone down fourfold in the amount of physical activity we used to have, and we're at a point now where to become healthy again, we need to create activity.
Wow. You've spoken a lot about diversity, and you gave an example about how we don't see even Indians as tall as they used to be. And so do we consider that nutrition is a major factor in that kind of transition from even having a taller height to a not so tall height? And if that is the case, how does the double burden of malnutrition, you spoke about the increase in non-communicable diseases as a result of ultra-processed foods and inactivity and all of that. And we know that when we talk about malnutrition, we're also looking at undernutrition. So how does the double burden of malnutrition manifest across the life cycle? And what are the strategies that can be used to address
Right.
this?
During the period of famine and the later periods of monoculture, increased density that we've seen in Africa, Asia, Latin America, stunting became a big concern. In fact, in my country, I'm quite old, and in the 1960s, I was involved in hunger in America. We had cases of kwashiorkor and marasmus in our
America.
country. Then what happened is we gave everybody food stamps to allow them to buy real food. We created reduced and free public health schools for the poor, and so kids got fed properly throughout the year, and families had the food to get around and to allow us to remove the hunger and malnutrition in my country. But today, and much of Latin America has done the same. Stunting reduced slowly, and it started a little bit higher in Africa and has slowly been reduced in every country. However, at the same time, due to all this cheap, ultra-processed food and other kind of street food and other things, full of palm oil, full of very unhealthy oils, fried over many times, we have increased obesity. And so we're increasing the overweight and obesity very fast, while the stunting is going down slowly. During this process, we've seen a shift from the higher income African countries like South Africa being very high in the double burden to middle Africa. Really much of Central Africa is now the place, going north from South Africa all the way to the Sahara, where we're seeing increasingly high levels of the double burden. And that's because the overweight and obesity is so cheap to gain this unhealthy food.
Right.
And we're seeing the overweight and obesity go up to such an extent that within 5 or 6 years, there'll be no country in Africa with less than 30% of the population overweight and obese. And stunting, except for the war zones, is going down slowly. Countries are having more income, providing more ways to help the very poor, but we still have these huge complex problems affecting the continent. And certainly the same thing goes in Asia, where the same kind of change is going on. You have high levels of double burden in the lower income Asian countries like Indonesia and India, and lower levels in many of the other Southeast Asian and East Asian countries.
Right. And across the life cycle, which group do we find to be most vulnerable?
Obviously, we have two groups now. We used to have just infants and toddlers. We still have too high of low birth weight, very bad, in fact. A lot of that comes from the teenage pregnancy and other things that still exist across this continent. But we aren't getting rid of that quick enough. We put in more and more global resources into it, but all these episodic wars, famines, and other things, plus the increasing problems of climate change, are really creating a complex world for Africa.
Right.
And sub-Saharan Africa is being hit one of the worst, along with South Asia and East Asia, from the climate change issues.
Wow, these are very insightful information. But in your experience, what are the most effective strategies for increasing demand for healthy foods? We've spoken a lot about how farming is affected us, how the demand for having even ultra-processed foods on the market. We want a quick way to provide food for the increasing population. So,
well, I'm actually focusing the last 10, 20 years of my life to working in that area.
Okay.
And we know that taxes on unhealthy beverages, taxes on unhealthy food are very effective when they're at 10% and higher, hopefully like 20% like we have in some countries. And we know that we can't just tackle sugar-sweetened beverages. We need to tackle the whole diet and change it. So the taxes are very important. We have found increasingly that putting warning labels, explicit, easy to see warning labels on the package saying this food is high in added sugar, high in sodium, high in saturated fat, which usually means that that food is ultra-processed. And that kind of a warning label has been shown to have as big an impact as we've ever seen with taxes.
do we have that practice in some countries already?
Yes.
Like you see a food label with
the taxes, after we did the evaluation and published an article in the British Medical Journal evaluating the Mexican tax, 50 countries picked it up quickly. After we did something similar with our colleagues in Chile, not with our colleagues in Mexico this time, we published some evaluations of the Chilean regulation that put the warning label on food. We saw a huge decline in consumption of sugar, salt in sodium in particular, a lesser decline in saturated fat.
Okay. So that when people have the right information, they're able to make the right choices.
Right. And then we've seen, in Chile, we also instituted a marketing ban, first completely on anything children saw. And as part of the front of the package, front of the package warning label, we also had a marketing ban. First, totally on children's food, including removing all characters and claims from the front of the package. But we found that children watched adult TV then, so we did a complete 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. reduction of all unhealthy food marketing. Anything with the warning label could not be seen on TV during those hours. And we had a huge impact on children. Children would tell their mothers what was they wanted them to buy healthy food for school because they couldn't bring the unhealthy food to school. And we started to see in school-age children the beginning of norm changes. Now, we also realize that the poor are not as able to be impacted by the front of the package labeling and these other laws because they don't have as much money to buy healthy food. So we are instituting in some countries, along with taxes, using a good portion of the tax money to give in some way income to the poor only to buy fruits and vegetables or whatever is called healthy by nutritionists in that country and seasonally appropriate. So we need all of these laws in a way. We need schools to have truly healthy food, nothing ultra-processed. We instituted that in a number of countries. And it's been very impactful, most so in Brazil, where 75% of the food that kids consume must be real food. And exactly a third of the population already, 100% must be real food or culinary appropriate ingredients. And so this is a package that can work, but it takes the government will, it takes the population to want it, and it takes a lot of NGO support, social marketing, and other kinds of things to get the kind of support to make this happen. But it can happen. I've seen it happen. Right now, South Africa is going to institute the front of the package labeling along with the sugary beverage tax. They're going to get rid of pictures and claims on packages, and we'll already see an impact from that. So we need Ghana and many other countries in the region to do what works, not what companies want. What the food companies want is nothing to happen, or they want regulations to be passed that don't have any effect. And the only approach on the label that has been shown to have effect is this big warning sign.
Big warning sign.
And that's what South Africa is going to institute. They're through with the response period, they're answering the responses, and they're going to institute the law.
We hope that more African countries will be able to
and we
this.
have 7 or 8 African countries considering warning labels right now. Whether they'll implement them, I don't know. I'm not involved in all of them, only a few, and I hope so. But there's a lot of forces against them, and they need strong social media and NGO support before this really can happen.
We can understand the complication in getting some of these regulations enforced, and all that sounds like policy and government. So how do educators like you, like everyone in the front line, how can we work with governments?
You talk to journalists, you talk to people in the Ministry of Health, and you try to get your voice heard. You write things for newspapers. You try to have journalist meetings where you talk about what's unhealthy in their diet. And if you find NGOs working on this, you find out how you can support them. Because really we need social activism to support. Because believe me, with the money the food industry is willing to put into a fight to stop any regulations, even if the companies won't lose money. I mean, Coke can sell water or Coke. Nestle can sell milk and other healthy food, and it can sell unhealthy food. So we need a way to. Industry does not want regulations. Their genetic makeup says nothing should regulate them. They know best. And they've been killing us.
Unfortunately.
They are essentially killing the world with the NCDs that they've created. The diabetes, the hypertension. If you had healthy diets, you would have very little of that compared to what you have today. You'd have some genetic problems and so forth. But the diet-related diseases are huge in Africa in particular, sub-Saharan Africa.
Wow. Well, we hope that we take some lessons from these communications and what's happening all over the world so we do better, and policymakers, governments can also push industries to do better. How can we also have interdisciplinary collaborations improve outcomes in nutrition and health initiatives?
So this is very complex. You have two sides of the nutrition community. You have the people that get money from the food industry who are very much on the side of the food industry. They are going to speak against everything I'm talking about. They're going to speak for the food industry, some of them. And what we need is the nutrition community that truly cares about health to get together and truly come out for what's good for the people, what's good for the planet, because the diet I'm talking about is much more sustainable. Mm-hmm. If we go back to fruits and vegetables and basic grains and commodities, we may have our animal source food, but we may have less of it, and we may have it with a lot less frying. If we could do that, we'd have much less climate burden. Right now, a Coca-Cola in Africa, 1 liter of Coca-Cola takes about 500 liters of water. That comes from the sugar that produces it, the vanilla and all the other flavorings, and the water that just goes into all the processing. So just imagine, that's just an example. Think of the countries in Africa that have a drought and are drinking Coke. That is just one simple example. And many of these ultra-processed foods are all factory made. Uses a lot more energy. It's a lot cheaper just to mill grain, make it into breads and other things, and clean the rice, mill the rice, and then cook it and have it in a very healthy way like you do now. But don't fill it full of the oils and don't use the modern ultra-processed food. Go back to more like real food. Even though you might have vegetables and other things cut and put into the stores that you buy it, so that it cuts time, because right now we're so used to buying things ready to eat and ready to heat. Well, you can do that with healthy food too. You don't have to do it with unhealthy food. And so you just need a new sector to arise that makes healthy food ready to eat and ready to heat.
Okay. And you've given us some insights here that if we're able to do more natural or less processed, we even are able to save some funds because you're using less energy. We are reducing packages that are going to be used for
and you're cutting climate
foods.
change.
Right. I think we need to let policymakers also understand how much we save if we're able to go on less processed.
There's one difficulty for Africa. Animal source food. Chickens and pigs and fish don't use much climate.
Okay.
But cows and sheep and goats, they do. And a basic part of the diet of much of this continent goes on these foods, which are huge users of water and big emitters, create all this methane, which is really dangerous, 50-fold difference over regular carbon emissions on its impact on climate. And so we need to lessen some of that. So that's going to be a harder lesson, to move more to poultry, to move more to pork, to move more to fish. Now, to the extent that can be done, then we've truly dealt with climate change and we'll have a healthier diet because those meats are less saturated fat.
Right. Healthy environments. Thank you so much for all that you have shared with us, Professor Barry Popkin. Your final words before I let you go.
Africa is going to become a very large continent. The birth rates in Africa are very high. The mortality rate is going down. Okay. This continent is going to grow to double its size in 40, 50 years. and it's going to become the second biggest continent in population. With that, unless Africa changes how it eats, we're going to have increasing amounts of overweight, obesity, diabetes, hypertension. People will become disabled much earlier in life, and we'll have a very complex kind of world. We do need changes. We need to deal with climate change in a million ways, not just with food. Food, though, particularly animal source food, is a truly major climate user. Our diets consume, the bulk of the water in the world. And just changing from a few items in your diet can cut the water use immensely. So we're going to have droughts increasing. And then on the other hand, the heat-created problems are only going to be lessened when we deal with climate change in every part of the world. And high-income countries are moving quicker than low-income countries, and understandably so, because we high-income countries did more to create the problem than anybody. Today, of course, the leaders are India and China, and the Western countries of fold are producing less. They're still producing too much. So we also need it. This is a one world today, and we need a one world solution.
Right. Thank you so much. You've shared with us great insights on what the nutrition transition is and how, as a people, as a country, as continents, globally, how we can all make contributions to improving our diets while we reduce unhealthy foods. You've talked about taxes, you've talked about the labels, and so I believe that our listeners have heard, and they're going to make use of all that we have said, all the information that we have provided. So thank you everyone for watching. This has been the African Nutrition Society's podcast, and you can put your comments in the comment section as well, and we'll get back to you. Thank you for watching.